Hi, multiplication fact strategy teachers. Today we're going to look at the less area compare multiplication fact strategy. Less area compare is very similar to more area compare. In less area compare, you're still taking a fact you already know, a benchmark fact, and you're still comparing it to a new fact. The difference is in less area compare, the benchmark fact is larger than the new fact. The new fact is smaller than the benchmark fact. So you're looking to see how much less area the new fact has than the benchmark fact. Let's take a look at an example. So here you can see I have the new fact outlined in red of 2 times 9. And if I didn't know 2 times 9, I could compare it to the benchmark fact 2 times 10. And of course 2 times 10 equals 20. Well, I can clearly see when I look at my picture that 2 times 9 is 9 rows of 2, and 2 times 10 is 10 rows of 2. So I can see that my new fact 9 times 2 actually has one less row, it's circled here, one less row of 2 than 9 times 2. So since I know the area of a 2 by 10, my benchmark fact is 20, and I know that 2 times 9 is one less row of 2, I could do 20 minus 2, which would equal, of course, 18. So 2 times 9 equals 18. It's one less row of 2 than 2 times 10. Let's take a look at another example of less area compare. So here I have the fact 6 times 9. And if I didn't know the fact 6 times 9, if that was a new fact or an unknown fact for me, I could use the benchmark fact 6 times 10 to help me solve it. Immediately, I know, of course, that 6 times 10 is 60. And I also notice that 6 times 9 and 6 times 10 have a common factor. The factor they have in common is a 6. And I also notice when I look at my area model that common factor, that 6, is the same as the number of squares in my one extra row. My benchmark fact has one more row of the common factor than the new fact. The new fact has one less row of the common factor, 6, than the benchmark fact. So a 6 times 9 rectangle has 9 rows of 6. A 6 times 10 rectangle has 10 rows of 6. And since 6 times 9, the benchmark fact, has less area or less rows of 6 than my benchmark fact 6 times 10, I have to subtract that extra row. I have to take away that extra row to go from a 6 by 10 to a 6 by 9, my new fact. I subtract that extra row of 6. 60 minus 6, of course, equals 54. So 6 times 9 equals 54. Just like with more area compare, it's very common for students to have a difficult time choosing a benchmark fact, or even having or have a difficult time knowing when to use which strategy. So it can be really helpful to teach your kids that less area compare is a great strategy to use when solving 9's facts, because 10 is, of course, right next door to 9. It's really close to 9. It's one away. And we always know our 10's facts. So 10's a great benchmark fact to use anytime you have an unknown 9's fact. So let's actually solve. Let me grab a pen here. Ooh. Let's actually solve 9 times 7 using less area compare. If I didn't know 9 times 7, immediately I see that factor of 9, and I know that a 10's fact could help me solve it. So I will use the benchmark fact 10 times 7. The 7, of course, stays the same in my benchmark fact because that's going to be my common factor, and 10 times 7 is my benchmark fact, which of course equals 70. Now, I notice, and you notice, and your kids will notice that there is that common factor of 7. And that is really important. And I always like to circle that with the kids. We find that common factor and we circle it. It's going to be critically important that they identify the common factor when they're actually trying to solve it. And of course, there has to be a common factor for them to use a fact as a benchmark fact. So 9 times 7 is 9 rows of 7. 10 times 7 is 10 rows of 7. My new fact actually has less area or less rows of 7 than my benchmark fact. To go from 10 times 7 to 9 times 7, I have to subtract one of those rows of 7. So I'm going to do that. And of course we have to regroup. And I can see that 70 minus 7 equals 63. So 9 times 7 equals 63. Another factor that less area compare is really helpful for solving are problems with factors of 4. Anytime a student is trying to solve a 4's fact, they can always use the less area compare strategy as a strategy to solve it, because 4 is really close to 5. It's right next door to 5. It's 1 less than 5, and 5 is another factor students are generally really familiar with their facts for. So if I don't know 4 times 7, I could use the benchmark fact 5 times 7, because 5 times 7 is really close to 4 times 7. It has a common factor, and of course I know 5 times 7 equals 35. Again, we notice the common factor is 7 between 4 times 7 and 5 times 7. They both have a factor of 7, so we'll circle that. And then we're going to think 4 times 7 is 4 groups of 7. 5 times 7 is 5 groups of 7. My new fact, 4 times 7, has less rows of 7 than my benchmark fact, 5 times 7. 4 rows of 7 is 1 less row than 5 times 7. So I need to subtract that extra row to go from my 5 by 7 benchmark to my 4 by 7 new fact. And again, we have to subtract with regrouping, I'm noticing. And we can see that 35 minus 7 equals 28. So 4 times 7 equals 28.